Welcome to the Frontline Herbalism podcast with your host Nicole Rose from the Solidarity Apothecary. This is your place for all things plants and liberation. Let's get started. Hello, welcome back to the Frontline Herbalism podcast. So this is part 3 in like a kind of broken up episode all about learning herbalism. So the first episode I was talking about like going deep with plants and finding kind of like a single plant to work with and getting to know them really well and kind of, approaching learning herbalism that way. I also talked about kind of following your passion and like the benefits of like DIY kind of learning, you know, listening to podcasts, YouTube videos, etc. And I also talk about the importance of like practical skills. And then the second episode, I kind of go into more depth about knowing your learning style and what kind of method of teaching and learning really works for you and your body and your nervous system and your life, and then how you can use that as like a basis of choosing a kind of path of study if that's what you want to do. I'll talk about some of the main kind of options for people in the so-called UK as well as other courses. So this episode now is 2 more sections, which is kind of looking for mentors. So I talk about the importance of finding people you feel affinity with, but also like, you know, killing your idols, like not having people on pedestals, recognizing that people are going to test you and trigger you and challenge you. And what can you sort of take from that as a learning experience? And obviously I talk about it in the episode, but there's a fine line between that and people, you know, like harmful, abusive behavior, for example. Looking at kind of different sort of mentoring programs I mentioned, and just kind of like the necessity of getting like real world experience and learning from people. And then I talk about this kind of like continual professional development, which is like the framework that herbal organizations use, like professional quote unquote organizations use, but really more about like how can you design your own learning pathway, and like find the courses that work for you in the moment, and like what are some of the skills we need in terms of preparedness and things that our communities are facing right now and are going to be facing even more of in the future. I hope it is interesting. I'm fascinated to hear what people think. I would like to dive into these different areas in more depth one day. I get asked so many times about how I've learned herbalism, what schools I've gone to, blah, 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 that I just thought sharing my general approach would be helpful. So let me know if it's helpful for you. And just a reminder, the Herbalism PTSD and Traumatic Stress course is open for enrollment as you're listening to this. That's March, by the way, in case you're listening like I do. I always go through, like, once I find a podcast, I just like go through the whole back catalogue. It's open for enrollment right now, and it's like a fantastic way to complement whatever kind of herbal training you're doing. It's also a fantastic way to begin your herbal training because I introduce lots of the foundational things like potent medicine making and building relationships with plants and herbal energetics and constitutions and herbal safety, and the sort of like foundational things you need to really get a kind of grounded practice, even if that practice is just looking after yourself. And I say just because looking after yourself is a massive fucking big deal and is hard enough. So it's not like that's not much compared to looking after other people. I just mean like, if you are just someone that is focusing on herbalism for you, which I strongly encourage, like I do think the course is a really amazing, like self-honoring gift, if that makes sense. But I think it's a fantastic introduction to herbalism. So I'm just going to plug it again. All right. I hope you enjoy this episode. Let me know what you think. And if you find value here, please share it with your friends. And thanks for listening. Take care. Bye. Okay, I am so sorry for the stop-start nature of this podcast. I just, have to stop sometimes because the baby and Rob's mum and stuff needed me. So, sorry if this is a little bit disconnected, but I was talking about some of the options in the so-called UK for learning herbalism. And I just want to say in the so-called United States, there's like 1,000,001 options as well. And I think I'm probably not the best placed person to talk about them because I don't know them sort of intimately, and I haven't met graduates of them, and I haven't heard their feedback about their tutors and things, if that makes sense. But I do think there is an option now, an amazing opportunity with the internet, that we can complement our learning and kind of design our own curriculums by like enrolling in other people's classes. So I can talk about my own experiences with those, if that makes sense. So I mentioned the SUD series before. I've also done some classes with the Commonwealth School of Herbalism, which is Katja and Rin, and I think they're fantastic herbalists. I think they have a really wonderful approach to herbalism, which is incredibly grounded and sensible, and just like kind of non-heroic, like straightforward, but also just like huge depth of knowledge. And they've been also really supportive with the prisoners' herbal work. I literally like send them like mountains of books, which a friend of theirs stored. And they helped get them out all over the US. So I have a lot of time for them. They also have a podcast called the Holistic Herbalism Podcast that you should check out. I've definitely done training with them and I think they're great. I've also done a lot of training with the Herbal Medics Academy. So that's Sam and Suchil Kaufman, who I think are in Texas. But they've got a lot of like more sort of kind of like first aid and like some trauma courses. And I've just been doing one about good manufacturing practices. And I always find their materials like incredibly high quality. Again, it's very suited to my learning style. So it's a lot of super visual things, great PowerPoints, tables. I can listen to them. I can revisit them. I can download the materials. I can ask questions like via email and things. I've really found their work like super high quality. And then, I've done the odd workshop here and there, like with different herbalists and things. I'm aware that like most of the teachers I've talked about so far are white. And I'm aware that there's like so many other teachers and programs and schools in the so-called US. I was just like looking online at this Herb and Cura website the other day because it came up on my Instagram feed, and they have like a kind of learning library where you can pay like $30 a month and access all their previous workshops. And they've got workshops on like opium medicine and plants in Palestine. And I think it's all kind of like, I don't know exclusively, but I think it's mostly BIPOC teachers, which is fantastic. So I think after this PTSD launch, I'm hopefully going to have more cash. So I'm going to enroll and invest in that. I do know that there is like a lot of economic privilege in learning. And I've been grateful and fortunate and privileged that what sort of paid for my clinical training was my granddad dying. And he knew that my mum doesn't own any property or anything, and my dad doesn't. And he knew that we weren't going to kind of like inherit anything, if that makes sense. So he left us, like me and my sister, like a bit of money as well as leaving money to my mum. I basically used that towards my clinical training, and I bought my van, which by the way is for sale. It's on Auto Trader at the moment. And that paid for my clinical training and built my herb shed. So without that access to capital, that I just want to name that's like enabled shitloads of my training. I also redistributed a lot of that money, donated it to various places. In hindsight, I think I should have like maybe whacked some in a pension or a savings account, but I was just like, oh, money, I don't know what to do with this. But obviously I really believe in redistribution and mutual aid, and I would have, given it to different projects anyway. But I'm just saying like, I just want to name that there was privilege there in these courses, and that is why that kind of like initial self-foraging approach is kind of often like the only choice we have. Like if you don't have surplus money to invest in education, then things like podcasts and, free workshops and stuff are like really powerful. And that is why with the herbalism, PTSD and traumatic stress course, like I didn't want a model where like people can only access, I don't want to say low quality freebies, because I think freebies can provide a lot of value, like my herbal guide to panic attacks, for example, or my like short workshops online. But like I get so frustrated that if you don't have any money, you're just meant to like get by on those offerings, and you're not meant to have access to like other structured courses or more support, or like, like why should someone who has like chronic illness and autoimmune issues and stuff, because of like a lifetime of class
or racial, gendered stress then only have to like muddle through supporting their own health with what they can gather with their limited brain power and brain fog. Like, it just doesn't feel okay to me. Like, I would much rather that person can access like one-to-one support in a clinic, for example, the same as someone that's like middle class or highly financially resourced can access a herbalist like whenever they want, right? So anyway, side rant, but that's why with the Herbalism, PTSD and Traumatic Stress course, I wanted it to be that like wherever you are on that sliding scale, including 0, you have the same access to education as someone else. And I don't know many herbal schools that do that. I know like several schools do give a lot of scholarships away, and you know, there's like kind of often like lengthy processes of application and stuff. Like, I'm not judging other people's models. I never want to give bloody business advice or judge other people. Like, it's not my style. Like, if you follow me on Instagram and stuff, like, I don't criticize people. I don't like participating in cancel culture because I've been doing abolitionist stuff forever in terms of prisoner support, and a lot of people in prison that I know have actually done some really harmful shit, and it's about addressing that and the root causes and trauma and blah blah blah. So yeah, I'm not gonna like fling mud at someone who's like written something badly online because that's where they're at in their learning journey anyway. But I obviously am all about people fighting like oppressive institutions and, you know, challenging people that are causing harm and stuff, and, you know, sabotage and all the things. Wow, sorry, that was another side rant. But what I'm trying to say is, like, I don't want herbalists or other people to feel sensitive about me saying about access and class stuff and sliding scale, because I do have a lot of privilege to be able to access that with the PTSD course, in the sense of living in a static caravan, having low living expenses. Well, other than the cost of food is absolutely horrific now. But I mean, you know, I've got one child and yeah, this access to housing here. So it's not like a lot of people that are living in central London and are paying like £1,500 a month in rent. Do you know what I mean? So anyway, no judgment for me for people needing to charge for their offerings. I think you have to. I'm just saying that, yeah, I just want to acknowledge that it can take privilege to undertake kind of herbal education, and that looks different to different people. Like, some people might be putting all of their clinical training on loans and credit cards and stuff, for example, and other people just, you know, are able to pay for it like one-off or get family support or whatever. So I think anyone running a course needs to be aware of like the different dynamics and who gets to enroll and who doesn't, unfortunately. Anyway, but yeah, in the so-called US, there's like tons of offerings. Unfortunately, English is my only language, so my education is restricted to that. But I know there's like other programs in other countries and other languages. Like, obviously, herbalism is something all over the bloody planet. So there's like 1,000,001 learning opportunities beyond the scope of this podcast. And yeah, like, I think that leads me onto the kind of like next thing, which is like finding the right mentors for you. So like, I think that we learn when we're in like a kind of quote unquote positive learning environment, when we feel safe, not in a kind of like hippy dippy way, but in a way where like we're in like safe and social in our nervous system. We, you know, we can connect and communicate with people and trust people, and we're not like hyper vigilant and stressed and scanning the room for danger and all of this stuff. Like, I think we learn best when we're in that kind of like receptive, engaged, like nervous system state. And that means like being with mentors and teachers that you feel quote unquote safe with, like, you know, who you feel affinity with, which is why it's so important that, you know, racialized people can have teachers from their own lineages. Like, that's why it is so vital, because, you know, it creates a sense of safety and belonging. And yeah, they're not going to be scanning for kind of like racist commentary and like problematic teaching styles and, you know, transphobia and what the teacher's saying. And do you know what I mean? Like, we need teachers and mentors that we feel affinity with. So yeah, like that. And I think I don't really need to say that because it's really obvious, but I think sometimes people join a school and then they're really disappointed that it's like X, Y, and Z. And it's like, well, has that course website, like, have they explicitly shared their values? Like, have they said they're anti-capitalist or anti-racist? Like, you know, who's the kind of faculty, so to speak? Like, what content are they putting out? And, you know, sometimes you get a nice surprise and you don't always know like who's running something on the inside. But yeah, like I think, yeah, finding people you feel affinity with is really important. And I also want to say, because I've been very blessed to have different mentors, like in the sense of plant medicine school, like the teachers and the people that you can do clinics with are like so fantastic and like high quality in terms of their approach to herbalism, in my opinion. But I've also been very lucky to work with the mobile herbal clinic and have like various different clinical supervisors. Because obviously, like the first year I was doing the project, I was still a student, or maybe a year and a half. So I wasn't, you know, I had to have like total clinical supervision basically, and I was doing like the field coordinator, logistics and stuff. And obviously, you know, you're soaking everything up like a sponge, so you are learning so much clinical stuff. And we have the clinical debriefs in the morning, so you're learning more of that. And I would obviously like be in this sort of self-foraging zone. You know, if you see someone in the morning with something you don't recognize, and then your clinical supervisor tells you, oh, I think it's this and this, and then you go home and look it up and research it. Like that's how it would work for me in terms of like my learning growth. But yeah, I was very lucky to be mentored by other herbalists. For example, Melissa Ronaldson, who's a herbalist in London, who has like a herbal barge project, who's just like got like so much knowledge and experience. And like Dej Lembrandt, who does like herbal first aid at festivals, who's qualified paramedic now. She's also a trained nurse. She's trained in traditional Chinese medicine, as well as sort of traditional, I hate the phrase Western herbalism, but you know what I mean. And she just taught me like so much first aid stuff over like months and months in Calais, like during the pandemic. And I'm like so grateful for that. So I think like, and you know, and there's like been multiple other clinical supervisors, including someone called Noelle, who's a doctor and a herbalist, who's like fantastic, who I've learned loads from. So it's like getting yourself into opportunities where you can learn from people is so important, and having that active mentoring. Because I know how hard it is. Like now that I'm not going to Calais, I really miss that like opportunity for clinical practice where it's like collective, you know, where you can like bounce ideas off people and talk to them about herbalism, and oh, well, I don't formulate like that, and oh, have you considered putting this in, and da 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 da, and oh, that didn't work for me, and da 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 da. Like you learn so much from other people, and that's why things like online memberships and, you know, even bloody Facebook groups or whatever are so great, because you can be like sharing that collective knowledge and like learning from each other. So yeah, any kind of opportunities you can find to find mentors is really, really good. I think it's also important to kind of like recognize that like every mentor has like strengths and weaknesses. And that I personally think we need to sort of like kill our idols, in the sense of like putting people on pedestals is really, really dangerous, because you will be disappointed. And yeah, you will think that someone could or should be a certain way, and then they're not, or they might surprise you with something they come out with. And like, I think I just think like every mentor relationship, like you need to have it with a pinch of salt, where you're taking some really amazing things from that person, but you're also, you know, potentially triggered and challenged. And like, when I look back in my life, like some of the people that have had the biggest influence on me have been like fucking assholes. Do you know what I mean? Like someone I did this big campaign with that I went to prison with was like pure out abusive, like horrible man. And like, but taught me like so much about like security culture and how to do actions and all this shit. And like, you know, I've been very fortunate to have lots of amazing like elders and mentors like in the animal liberation movement and anarchist movement and things, who have influenced me. But you pick up both things, right? Like you pick up the bad shit, like you pick up cultures of like self-neglect, for example, or workaholism, or, you know, doing something really unsustainably. And then you also pick up like the strategy and the compassion and the, you know, the skills, the graphic design, the film editing, whatever it is. And yeah, I think in the herbalism context, like, you know, like you will find people who sort of like test you and trigger you, if that makes sense. And like that in a way is like a learning opportunity. Like I think like abusive mentors should be like like 100% challenged, and like abuse should not be acceptable. You know, like I've heard horror stories about Susan Weed like strangling a student and stuff, and that to me is just like, no, okay, you might be a spiky mentor, but that's just like, that's the fucking line. Like that's very different to someone, you know, challenging you and your practice and making you reflect. Like for example with Melissa, like she was very like critical, which was very difficult for lots of volunteers who would sometimes be in tears, and I'd have to sort of soothe them and support them. But her critical thinking around like clinical safety of, you know, okay, you've seen 10 people with a cough, but did you ask how long they've had the cough? And if you didn't, then that person might have TB and you fucked it and you didn't know that. So like she sharpened me so much clinically, where it was like, my hypervigilance somehow of making a mistake made my practice like very thorough, but also like there are like negative things around that too, right? Which I won't go into detail because I don't want to, you know, like name and shame, if that makes sense. But I'm just saying like mentoring relationships aren't always like easy, but we can still like learn from people and grow from those experiences, and then think about how, you know, how do we react to people? Like how am I as a mentor, for example, like, and how does that feel to people who come on my courses or do my online classes or whatever? So yeah, I think find the people you feel affinity with. Don't be afraid to work with people that are different to you, because they might become big teachers and sort of powerful growth enhancers. Does that make any sense? I know that there are like various mentoring schemes, like the American Herbalist Guild have like a mentoring program where you can like, you know, see a directory of herbalists that are offering like mentoring hours. I don't think mentoring always has to be formal. Like it's not always just approaching someone being like, hey, can I have you as my mentor? Like it's often more like, you know, oh, okay, I'm going to do clinical hours with this person and see how they do it. And I'm going to do clinical hours with this practitioner and see how different they are. Or I'm going to have clinical hours in Calais and see what that's like as a setting to kind of work as a herbalist. And yeah, I just think like that variety creates like a rich kind of resilient like learning ecosystem for yourself, and that yeah, we can learn from lots of people and their sort of backgrounds. All right, so now I'm going to talk about this kind of like what an herbal organization, like, you know, that has members and things would call like CPD, so like continual professional development. You might not identify as a quote unquote professional, you know, that's something to kind of explore and like kind of interrogate together. But what I'm basically talking about is like your lifelong learning. So this is maybe pitched at people that have done some kind of body of clinical training that are then like, what's next after this? But it might also be for people that are just like curious about the kind of like self-determined learning, right? Where you're like self-foraging and gathering information and doing short courses and listening to podcasts and things to kind of build your own knowledge. But I think I'm just going to use like CPD as like shorthand. But I think there's different approaches to this. So I really love this, you know, this framework of like just-in-time learning, of like you learn what's kind of like relevant and like at the bottom of your nose, if that makes sense. I'm so bad with metaphors, by the way. Like my partner pisses himself because I'm always getting them muddled up. So I'm sorry, I don't know what I was trying to say then, but basically the thing right in front of you. So say, for example, I'm in a one-to-one clinic and I have a client who has like polycystic ovarian syndrome. And, you know, maybe I've studied it in my clinical training, which was several years ago, and I just need like a refresher, and I want to know, okay, what are the kind of current research like around this? What is potentially useful? So, you know, that might just be as simple as revisiting my kind of herbal textbooks, or that might be like searching and finding an online workshop about it with a herbalist that I really trust, for example, or buying a book. Or, you know, like, I don't know if people have heard of Camille Freeman's model, which is called like Monday mentoring. So there's like a weekly kind of Zoom where people can like bring kind of like cases and stuff and questions about their like clinical practice. And, you know, you learn from Camille and all her experience, and you learn from your peers. And then she's got like a fantastic library of like different workshops that have sometimes had like a theme. Like she had like a whole year of workshops all about the digestive system and the reproductive system and things. So it's like when I was enrolled in that, it might be like I'm seeing a client and they have a certain issue, and I might just like visit her library and find, okay, what's Camille presented? Okay, she presented this paper about this, and this. Okay, I'm going to try this protocol. Oh, I'm not quite sure. I'll just drop her a message and see, how many mil of Vitex is blah, 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 blah. So I think like that's again the best thing about having mentors who've supported other people, is that you're sort of like fast tracking your knowledge, and you're kind of like, that clarifying the information you need like faster. But yeah, I really love this kind of like just in time learning approach, because like, again, like I said, like your brain can only hold so much information. Like maybe if you've been in clinical practice for 20 years, you don't need to like revisit references and things. But I think, this is what I talked in the last episode about one of my mentors, Melissa Ronaldson, and it's like she would say to me, she's like, I've spent 2 days like researching this thing for this patient, and she got paid 40 quid for the consultation, and it's just like, that is the challenge about herbalism, is there's just like so much to learn. And I think that is why it's like nice to sort of specialize a bit, because you can go like deeper and deeper into your particular field of interest. Like for me, I'm very interested in sort of nervines and kind of people that are like burn out and like have sort of like chronic inflammation, but are maybe not like hardcore chronically ill. Like I've never supported someone with cancer, for example, whereas other people would like specialize in oncology and do loads of extra kind of curricular study about that and try and learn from herbalists who've been working in that field. Do you know what I mean? Like I think herbalists are generalists, and I think if you have any sort of herbal medicine practice, you will have like everything under the sun like presented to you in terms of different health needs. But I think like focusing is very powerful and can make you a bit more adept at your particular area. So yeah, being kind of focused is helpful, but I think maybe there's also that risk then of like you're limited to a particular situation, and then if you want to kind of practice like real world herbalism, for example, the Mobile Herbal Clinic Calais, you're going to be presented with everything under the sun, right? And and this is what my Do No Harm course is about, is, if someone presents to you with a headache, okay, you might think, oh, Bethany, blah, blah, blah. But actually, are you thinking, has this guy had a head injury? Has he like smashed his head like against the inside of a lorry? Has he had a cop hit him? Do we need to take him to hospital? Like we're constantly scanning for red flags. And so somewhere like Calais, you need to not only be shit hot on your upper respiratory infections, you also need to study, wound care and infection control and digestive health. And you do need that like generalism, that sort of general practice approach, whereas other people, you might set up a particular clinic where you're just focused on people with endometriosis, for example. So I think, yeah, like you can design your own learning pathway to meet your needs and what you're interested in and what you're passionate about, and you can be sort of needs led. But the thing that I love most about having a one-to-one clinic, like, which I unfortunately had to stop doing when I got pregnant because I had horrific hyperemesis, I was like vomiting 30 times a day, is like I love that like the people you're supporting are your biggest teachers, because you'll study like chronic fatigue syndrome or something in your clinical training, and then you'll have someone with chronic fatigue, and like actually it'll be very different, or it's very different to the last person you saw with chronic fatigue. So yeah, like I think having that real life experience and being needs led and being able to like self forage and build on your knowledge is like really, really powerful. So you can do that in a way that is like needs led, but you can also do that in a way that's like following your passion. So it might be that like, yeah, you are like particularly passionate about metabolic syndrome or insulin resistance or whatever, like, and that takes you somewhere. Or, often it's our own health issues that take us in a certain direction. Or it might be that you do your herbal medicine training and then you're like, actually, I just want to be a grower. Like, I'm not that interested in one-to-one consultations. I want to start a community herb farm, or I want to run a community garden and, offer emotional support to the volunteers. Like, you don't have to fit into this box of I'm just this herbalist who sees people in a room in a clinic and that is my only pathway. Like, herbalism is so expansive and there are like so many options. If you are part of like a herbal association, you will sort of need to kind of document your CPD. But I think that's really good, because then you can just, acknowledge like how much you're learning and, the things you're doing to like improve your practice. And like, even if we are like anarchist as fuck and community based as fuck, and, that doesn't mean that we don't have clinical integrity, like, because herbal training is obviously different all around the world, but it's like, I think most herbalists are so dedicated and passionate and devoted to their craft that A, we keep learning because we love it, but B, we care about the people we're seeing. It's not like, here's an expensive consultation, I'll give you these supplements, I never think about you again. It's really like, we're co-creating with our clients to improve their health and support them. And actually, we want the herbs we're working with to work, right? Like, we want an ongoing relationship with that person. We want to kind of demonstrate the power of herbal medicine. And so, like, investing in that learning pathway is really, really important. And I guess that's my final point, is that herbalism is like an absolute lifelong learning journey. Like, there will always be tens of thousands of plants that I don't know, that I don't have a relationship with. And that makes me really sad that I'm only going to be able to make a relationship with a certain number of plants in my lifetime. But, that's how it is. And I think, accepting how little we know is so empowering, but also embracing like the wonderful world of plant medicine is also amazing. But just a shameless plug with my herbalism, PTSD and traumatic stress course is like, even though like we should be following our passion and doing things that are need-led and just in time, things like this, like there are things that will come up that affect every single human being who we want to serve or who we are serving. And that, in my opinion, is trauma. Not everyone has had some like hardcore, gnarly, traumatic childhood, or has, grown up in a genocide or a war zone, or experienced like really high levels of traumatic stress. But most people have endured some level of chronic stress, some level of like significant bereavement in their life. Like I shared an Instagram post which was talking about like statistics around trauma and abuse, and just like how many children are abused, like how many adults disclose when they're older about abuse as a child. So it's like, you can guarantee that someone you're supporting in your clinic will have had that as a factor, and that is radically affecting, or like potentially affecting, their physiology, their patterns of disease, their whole nervous system state, and that is going to be feeding into how, their health challenges. So like, I do think trauma is like something that all herbalists need to know about. And I think when we don't understand it, we do cause harm. And that's like a whole other podcast episode on its own. But I think if we're interfacing with people who, are kind of maybe not verbally expressing what they've been through, but their body is expressing distress in a certain way, then I think we need that vocabulary and that understanding of different nervous system states to kind of, be able to support them. It might be that you can't even get through a consultation with someone because they're so much in fight or flight that they're not opening up about what's going on, and they're struggling to communicate, and they're struggling to implement changes, like things like that. So having this language and this familiarity with the nervous system and our different states, I think is like really, really critical. And I also think looking ahead, for the challenges we're facing now of rising fascism, climate change, like societal collapse, like, war and invasion and genocide, like there is so much going on. Like, it's like we have to be prepared, and that is a whole other podcast episode as well. But like, we need to be thinking not just about the skill sets that we need now, the needs we're responding to now, like people growing up in poverty and having mold-related illness because they've been living in damp housing their whole life, or people having terrible nutrition because of industrial agriculture and, consumer capitalism or whatever. Like, we are already dealing with a lot of like societal challenges that are causing so many of the health issues, or all of the health issues that we're seeing in our practices. But there are like big times to come, right? Like, and I think that's why the mobile herbal clinic is such a kind of innovative project, is because, we're going to have to be more engaged in like disaster response, and more people forced to migrate more state violence. So it's like building those tools is really, really important, and building those skills to practice herbalism in different ways. Like, for example, like in Calais, a lot of students who come, they're used to being in clinic in a certain way, right? Where you have like, I don't want to say like an indulgent amount of time, but you have a good 40 minutes, like maybe more or less, to talk about something with someone, to ask them all the questions under the sun. And then you have time to like talk as a group. You get support from your tutor, and yeah, like you have time potentially afterwards to research things, to then, create the best plan for that person. Whereas when you're like doing like acute herbalism work, you need to like really think on your feet. Like you need to know how to change a dressing fast because you've got 30 other people waiting with the same issue. You need to be able to spot the sickest person in the line so that you can get them to hospital. Like you need to have a whole other game of neuroplasticity. And so I think like herbalists have the opportunity to kind of preemptively think about where we want to practice, the different scenarios, we're likely to practice in. And one of the offerings I'm sort of working on at the moment, like, at night when my baby is sleeping next to me on my phone, I'm working on this Frontline Herbalism membership program. So that will have all of my courses like available for a small monthly price. And I'll offer kind of like mentoring and support, and have like a bunch of other herbalists around that can also answer questions and things. And it will be focused on supporting people to develop those skills that are maybe not taught in other herbalism schools, like how to start community projects, how to run free clinics, how to run mobile clinics, how to support unhoused folks, like herbalism and harm reduction, like herbalism and preparedness and climate change, like, all of these other skills that complement this like strong foundational training that you'll get if you go to a herb school, hopefully, and engage in thousands of hours of training and clinical practice, etc. So I just want to say, like, I think learning about trauma is really, really important for everyone. And I think my course is like a great offering for that in terms of like foundational knowledge and learning about polyvagal theory and taking a bit more of a deep dive into the nervous system and stuff. But yeah, the kind of thing that I do every year is I create like a learning pathway design. So this is like setting out my sort of learning goals for the year, looking up courses or workshops I'd like to do, making a little budget. Some of them are just on there every year. Like I really want to do some functional medicine training and it is just like eye-wateringly expensive. So I never sign up for it, but determined to do it this year. And yeah, like just kind of setting your goals. Like maybe I'll do, if people are interested, let me know. I could do another episode about how to design your own sort of herbalism learning pathway. But it's really about like identifying your sort of gaps and your areas of weakness. Like maybe you're fucking fantastic with your digestive system, materia medica, but actually your dermatology skin stuff is just like, I mean, obviously the skin and digestion are really connected, but I just mean like, how can you like address your own areas that feel less strong, if that makes sense? So anyway, that's what I encourage you to do, is have some intentionality and planning around it so that you can keep learning, so that you can keep serving your communities. Okay, and I'm sorry a lot of this has been orientated towards people that are like, engaged sort of clinical herbalists, so to speak, but I think everything I've said is also maybe relevant wherever you are in terms of what you're doing and wanting to learn about herbalism. And I've definitely had a combination of all of these approaches. I've done the formal clinical training. I've done lots of online workshops and courses. I've read lots of books, listened to podcasts, got all the practical experience on the land, sort out different mentors, and it is that whole diversity of experiences that I think contribute to someone feeling like a strong and confident herbalist. Because I think that's the challenge, is when people don't feel confident, they don't practice, and then they're not helping people, they're not doing what they want to do out of fear. And that is part of this Do No Harm course, is trying to build people's confidence so that they feel like they can really serve their people, right? Anyway, I've been blathering on a long time now, and I have to edit all of these as well before I get the baby back. So I'm going to stop now, but I'm just going to remind you that the Herbalism PTSD and Traumatic Stress course is still open for enrollment for another couple of weeks. So please jump in. No one's turned away for lack of funds. It's a really great structured way of learning about herbalism that is also flexible and supportive and hopefully nourishing. So yeah, please check that out. Thank you for listening and speak soon. Bye.
Thanks so much for listening to the Frontline Herbalism podcast. You can find the transcript, the links, all the resources from the show at solidarityApothecary.org/podcast.